We'll be fine. She'll be fine.
Okay,
Oh,
I think we'll get going here. So, hello and welcome. It's so wonderful to see everybody tonight at this candidates forum. Can everybody hear me still? I just want to make sure. Okay. So this is part of a series of 13 forums that are happening across the state. My name is Selena, and I live here in Bennington. And like you, want to make our community the best it can possibly be. But we are here tonight so that we can ask our legislators to help us accomplish this fact. This candidates forum, like I said, is one of a series of such forums that are going around all around the state of Vermont to let our legislators candidates know what we hope our elected representatives will do to protect and serve our human rights. So for your convenience, restrooms are located through that door where you came in. And please feel free to sit and stand according to your comfort throughout the evening tonight. And of course, help yourself to refreshments located back here at any point during the evening.
Hi everyone, I'm John Dunham. You'll notice that all the seats in the audience have index cards on them. Throughout the forum, please feel free to write down any questions you may have for a particular candidate on that card. They will be collected periodically this evening by Peter and Nancy. Please also write your name on the top of the card. We will not get to all of the questions. If we select yours, if you would like to ask it yourself, please raise your hand when we call your name. Please include your email address on the card if you have one, otherwise your phone. If there are any questions we do not have time to get during the evening, we will give them to the candidate to whom you address the question so that they may follow up with you personally. We will also give the candidates copies of all questions on the cards so that they may respond to you individually by return email. If you receive such a response email, please share it with us, and we will forward the response to the audience based upon the sign-in information. This forum is hosted by Vermont Worker Center, Ghana's, Bennington College Group. The word Ghana's means motivation to act in Spanish. Vermont Early Educators United, Vermont Center for Independent Living, supporters of the Vermont Veterans Home, and 350 Vermont. We have ASLL interpreters here tonight. Thank you for joining us, and to all those who made tonight's forum possible.
So let's welcome the candidates we have here joining us this evening. And this series of forums is for candidates running for State Senate and House of Representatives. So tonight we have with us, and I apologize if I mispronounced your last name, please correct me, Brian Campion, running for State Senate, Dick Sears, also running for State Senate, Joanne Ehrenhaus,
Yes.
State Representative, Mary Burroughs Schwalz, State Representative. Is she here or no?
See her.
Okay. Bill Botso, State Representative, Steve Barry, State Representative, Mary Morrissey, State Representative, Rachel Fields, State Representative, Alice Miller, State Representative, Kaya Morris, State Representative, and John Moran, State Representative.
Tonight we will have a chance to hear about a number of issues of concern to all of the organizations represented here tonight. We'll hear stories from people right here in our community. These stories represent not just their individual struggles, but the struggles of so many of us in our community. And we know that our human rights are interconnected, not independent, and that the solutions must also be interconnected. For the first set of questions, with our guest candidates have received in advance of this forum, we ask that each limit the response to 1 1/2 minutes. Timekeepers will make sure we stay on schedule tonight, and Nancy will hold up a yellow card when you have 30 seconds left, and a red card when your time is up.
Are you going to do it, Sheila? Okay, so Sheila's right here, so you can see her. And I'll make sure to cut you off if we're getting too close to the time. So for our first story in question, I'd like to introduce Carlos from Ghana.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Carlos.
Hi.
Dear candidates, my name is Carlos Mendez, and I come to you as one of the 11 million undocumented immigrants of our country. Many of us Americans at heart, productive members of society, studying at colleges and universities, paying taxes, contributing and supporting our economy, and working with dignity with diverse skill sets. I would like to take this opportunity to speak on behalf of a member of our Bennington community, Jose Nelson, an undocumented immigrant who was working in a dairy farm for over 2 years, very active in learning the language, constantly engaging with Bennington College students, and was recently applying for a driver's privilege card. Truly a law-abiding citizen. The family that he worked for describes him as a goal-driven individual that did not smoke, did not drink, and did not get into any type of trouble, and genuinely became part of the family. 2 weeks ago, here at Bennington, his human rights were violated as he was arrested, turned into immigration officials, and is currently facing deportation for attempting to apply for his driver's privilege card. Stories as that of Jose unfortunately occurred throughout our state, where there are approximately 3,000 undocumented immigrants who are supporting our dairy farm industry and are constantly facing the fear of deportation and racial profiling despite the implementation of the bias-free policing policy law H535 and the law that allows undocumented residents to apply for driver's privilege cards. Additionally, our undocumented population has a considerably high risk of injuries due to the nature of their work and face barriers that are difficult to overcome in order to obtain basic preventative health care. I am a senior at Bennington College, and along with other students, we're part of a student-run organization called GANAS that focuses on addressing these issues in the town of Bennington. However, part of successfully addressing these issues means working together. That means community members, students, and legislative representatives alike. I ask you tonight, candidates, do you stand with the undocumented population of Vermont that are the main supporter of the dairy industry? Do you support the inclusion of undocumented residents in the Vermont Universal Care Act, so this act would truly be universal, which would work towards decreasing the number of deportations that are separating families across our country?
It's for you. It's for you.
It's the first question.
Yeah, it's the first question.
I'm disabled. I have very hard of hearing, and I'm afraid it's gotten worse over the last few years. So I didn't really quite hear the question. Is it number one?
No, I'm sorry.
No.
It's number three.
Number three.
Why don't I go first, and then you can?
Go ahead.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. Just to give Alice an opportunity to read it, it's number 3 on your list. I'm State Representative Brian Campion. Dick Sears and I are running together for the State Senate, and this is a terrific question, and one that we talked quite a bit about this year in the legislature. Many of you know that we did pass a bill to give drivers privilege cards to undocumented workers. It's something I voted for and continue to support for a number of different reasons. First, I'd say and foremost, if that kind of transportation is essential for one's health and safety. People do need to get to medical care, people need food, people need access to a wide range of things. So for me, it was, of course, something that I did vote, and I believe many people here did support that bill. And without a doubt, I think, based on that evidence of my continued support for undocumented workers in the state of Vermont. Thank you.
I also voted for that bill. I'm Alice Miller. I've been in the legislature for 18 years. I'm on the House Appropriations Committee. I've been there for 9 years. And I served on the Education Committee for 6 years and on Fish and Wildlife for 2 years. All tremendous experiences. Our dairy farmers very much need to be hiring people because people from this country, from this state, are not applying for the jobs on the dairy farms. And there are many people who are not from this country who want to work there, and I think that's just great. We need to support our businesses, our industries, and we need to support them. It is the decent American thing to do.
Thank you. Oh, we done.
You can go over.
I don't want to strangle anybody.
Especially as running mate.
especially my running
Not
mate.
yet.
Not yet. Okay. I may later. I don't know if I really need, I really don't know if I need the mic, but if you can't hear me, shout out. I agree with what Brian and Alice have said. What I would add is, it's a national problem that Congress needs to deal with. States doing it 50 different ways isn't going to solve a national problem. It's time for our Congress to get together, and particularly the House of Representatives in Washington DC, to pass an immigration bill. Until that happens, states are really playing by a different set of rules. One of the things, I did support the driver's license. One of the things that I worked on this year is a bill called S-184. And S-184 contains language to move us forward in what had been called bias-free policing. My committee, I chair the Senate Judiciary Committee, my committee changed that to impartial policing. We believe that policing should always be impartial, and that there should be one standard in the state of Vermont. Right now, there are a number of standards which creates confusion. And hopefully by 2016, we'll have one minimum standard and others can move forward with a better one. So yes, but I really urge all of us to make it a priority to let Congress know they need to pass immigration reform.
I'm State Representative John Moran. I'm the Vice Chair of the Labor Committee in the Vermont House, and I'm also co-chair of the Working Vermonters Legislative Caucus. As a matter of fact, if you're going to bring a labor bill into the Vermont House, I will probably be one of the first people you want to talk to in the House on labor issues. I thank Dick for the non-biased policing bill and others. That was an excellent bill. I also am very grateful for the documented workers' right to have driver's license, and also universal health care. And I'll go one step further. I would like to see some organization among the undocumented workers so that they have more say in their working conditions.
Thank you.
That one doesn't.
Would you like the microphone?
I'll try to speak up. Can you hear me? Okay,
Take another front is better.
it's okay. Don't count my time.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Probably in the front, probably better.
It's connected to the back, though.
We'll take a short intermission here.
There we go. All right, untangled. There you are. Thank you.
Okay. And now that we're back from our station break, I'd like to address this issue. It certainly seems that this is not just an immigration problem, it's an economic problem. And if we feel that it is a necessity to have people come in from other countries to work and do jobs that are needed to be done, then the least we could do is welcome them. In that vein, we know that they are having problems. If they're having difficulty getting driving licenses and driver's privileges, which are statutorily provided to them, I can only imagine what other difficulties they're having. What I think on a national level, Dick has the right idea. This is a national issue, but here locally and in Vermont, I think it would behoove us, especially locally, to perhaps get a group of attorneys together who could sit down and be advisors and helpers to see what the issues are, how can you overcome them, and how to mentor some of these undocumented workers to avoid the pitfalls and perhaps give them the short EB-5 shortcut to residency.
Hi, I'm Rachel Fields. I hope everybody can hear me. I believe 100% that when it comes to healthcare, it costs more to try to keep people out than it does to bring them in. And migrant workers are living in our community. We are providing them with healthcare services, and we need to include them in our Green Mountain Healthcare plan. I also believe that this is a national problem that we need to address on the national level, and that if we all stand together and make a commitment, and I would commit to that, to letting our federal legislators know that this is important and it's a priority to us, that they do not continue with mass deportation of our migrant workers and undocumented immigrants in America. And I would also excuse me, I'm having a little bit of a respiratory thing. I would also encourage that whatever we do it smartly, and we do it with compassion being our number one basis in doing it. And thank you, Carlos, for reading that testimony.
Good evening, I'm Mary Morrissey, and I supported the legislation that Dick Sears put forth this year with the profiling with police, and pleased to do that. I would actually like to see that our state looks to provide legal documentation or a permit or a visa for our, and I hate using the word immigrant workers that are coming in, but those who are undocumented. I think that would provide a basis for individuals to be able to get their whether it's the privilege card, it would document you as being here. It would also help with our national security as to folks that are in our country, and we welcome everyone to be here. But I think it also is a further documentation that puts you here as a citizen as well. So I would want to work very strongly with the federal government, but also on our own level to have a documentation that has you as an individual here in our state that we respect.
Thank you. My name's Kaya Morris. So the rights of undocumented workers in Vermont is one that is a human rights issue, and it cannot be ignored. The workers that are working in our agricultural sector, it's there. It's one of those things that people don't want to talk about, but it's there. And it's a very passionate, hot-button issue for many individuals, but it's not one that we can ignore. Vermont is actually a state of immigrants. It's very apparent when you look through the rosters of the names, how many different nationalities have come to create and establish Vermont as their home. And that does not mean that we close our doors now that we've made this step of progress of being an inclusive state. So I think that when we think about healthcare and when we think about workers' rights, it's something that every individual deserves and every individual should have. When we're looking at this legislation, we believe, and I believe, that the political will is there. We have to be on point, though, with any policy we're going to put through so that it will not be overturned and so that we will not have to deal with an excruciating process of backlash from misunderstanding and miscommunication around this issue. It's one that our grandparents, our parents, our relatives, our cousins, many people were able to take advantage of to be able to establish themselves here in this country, and so we should not be denying that to others, nor should we see this as something that's a forgotten problem from the past, because it's one that we're facing full on right now.
I'll use this. I don't know if I need it that much. I'm Representative Bill Botso. I represent Pownell and Woodford. I serve on the Commerce and Economic Development Committee, and I think you're hearing a very strong consensus. I have little to add to that consensus, but for a few pieces. One, I want you to understand is that a bill like this took very careful deliberation before it came to the floor, with plenty of checks and balances that are always necessary. From that experience, it should be looked at again to see, did we get what we wanted out of it? What we basically want, I think, is to send the message, and this is the economic development part for me, is that hard-working people move forward, and that Vermont is a place where hard-working people move forward. I would also add that this isn't just the dairy industry. I served on agriculture for 4 years, and that meant a lot to me before my number of years on commerce, and now 5 as chair. There are other industries. This is important too. One of them, obviously, is the ski industry and all of the tourism and recreation industry, the hospitality industry. We need to be a place where we are a culture of work, and the culture of work comes best from people who have a taste for hard work and who do the right thing, and that having people live in the shadows is never a good idea, and the form of documentation that's carefully vetted with the proper screenings makes complete sense.
Well said. Thank you. Carlos, thanks very much for sharing tonight. My name is Steve Berry. I've dealt with persons who have had the problems that are occurring here in Vermont when I was in California. I lived 11 years in California and dealt with a lot of people. If you remove the persons who are undocumented aliens tomorrow, the entire economy of California would collapse the next day. These people are not viewed as being worthy of being citizens, but they're worthy of using for work to keep the economy going. I think that what you've heard tonight from this group is that we value persons who come here. Vermont is a place where we value people, individuals. It is a human right. You should be able to work, and you should also receive the support necessary if you want to work hard to stay here and to enjoy the health care benefits that everyone, we hope, will have in Vermont. So thank you for your testimony. I have worked in the last 2 years to help one person get their documentation papers successfully through the Immigration and Naturalization Service, so I can say it's a good thing.
Very quick one. Show of hands.
Okay. Can you say it loudly? Can you speak up loudly or clear it to me?
I'll speak it.
Okay. We have a quick question to the audience for a show of hands. Go ahead.
How many of you have parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents who are immigrants? Thank you.
I don't know.
Wait, Dick, nobody.
We've all adopted you.
Thank you all so much. If that's okay, we're going to leave this microphone down there, and then we'll do the reverse.
Sounds good.
So for our second story in question, I would like to introduce Tracy from the Vermont Center for Independent Living.
Thank you. It's just safer for me to sit.
Mike for Tracy.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm Tracy Dorman, a peer advocate counselor for the Vermont Center for Independent Living. Through my work at VCIL, I'm finding there are more and more individuals with disabilities that are becoming homeless. One would think that our safety net would be adequate enough to prevent such occurrences for this vulnerable population. When an individual is living on a fixed income, does not qualify for subsidy programs, or is placed on a 3-year waiting list for subsidized housing, there are not a lot of housing options available. One must juggle the cost of their prescriptions, food, rent, transportation, etc., to remain healthy or to prevent exacerbations of their disabilities. Many are forced to pay 50% or more of their income for housing. Some are able to find part-time jobs to supplement their income. Others are not able to work at all. Some of the programs that support these individuals have been cut already and are the first to be in jeopardy when considering budget deficits. The Vermont Rental Subsidy Program has been a godsend to many families. However, not everyone meets the criteria to qualify for that program. In fact, one must be homeless in order to qualify. Wouldn't it be more cost-effective to assist these individuals before they become homeless and the domino effect of needing shelter and first, last, and security deposits for a different place to live? As a potential representative, how will you be representing these individuals, or what safeguards or programs do you think should be available to prevent homelessness, especially for this population?
At the early part of the last session, last January, we realized, as we have for a couple of years, quite frankly, we have a very serious problem with the homeless. The governor, practically the first or second week of the session, added $500,000 to the organizations that provide housing for the homeless. My committee supported that 100%. We have to find another solution to the homeless problem. Motels don't work. They don't work for families, for kids. They're too expensive. They're breaking out the back of the state, and they're not providing quality care. Utah is doing an interesting thing. Utah is buying empty houses, foreclosures. They're finding that it's much cheaper to buy those homes, put people in them, homeless people in them, rather than paying these outrageous hotel prices, which are costing us millions and millions of dollars. I think Vermont should look into that.
Is this on? Can people hear me? Is this on now?
There should be a big dial, there's on and off switch on.
Just speak loudly and I'll see what I can
Okay.
do.
It's on?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I really would echo what Alice said. With regard to the homeless, motels certainly are incredibly and prohibitively expensive and not sustainable, but also for children in particular to have to live in a hotel and move from one spot to another. As a member of the House Education Committee, that's no way to not only learn, but to feel safe and cared for. I don't know about the Utah program, but I certainly, without a doubt, believe that we do need to look at a much more sustainable way to address the homelessness issue. Again, not only just for financial reasons, but talk about a human right, talk about a huge issue of equity, particularly for, I'd say, our most vulnerable populations, the disabled, the elderly, and young children. So I too have supported the governor's increase and will certainly work as hard as possible to put forward programs that make sense.
I don't quite know how to react to the question. I think the question begs a much larger discussion of budgeting issues. I've served in the legislature, I think, about 2 decades on the Appropriations Committee. The last 5 years have been devastating for the state in trying to come up with the money for a number of different programs. Right now, we're looking at a budget gap of $100 million, folks. And if somebody's going to promise new programs, I want to make sure we can keep the ones we have. That's my first priority. I think if we can find better ways to deal with some of these problems, such as homelessness and so forth, all the better. Now, there have been enough stories about the motels, and some of them are horror stories, particularly in Barre, where many of the hotel rooms were substandard, bed bugs, et cetera, not working heat, things like that. We have to find a better way. But we face an economic crisis in this state as well, and we better be aware of that. And the next session, whoever is up there, is going to be dealing with another huge budget gap. And that's about 10% of the total general fund budget. Just think about it in those terms. So before I promise something, I have to stop.
The full title of the committee I serve on, I didn't mention, is General Housing and Military Affairs, which means we deal with homelessness not only for the general population, but for also homeless veterans. I think my answer can be consistent with what Dick said and what Alice said and Brian said. When Alice said somebody should look into this housing first, or the Utah model, as a matter of fact, we are going to do that. The Utah model is basically this: be prepared for a surprise. The best solution for homelessness is to put people in houses. That's the best solution. And we found out in Utah that the cost of service to people who are not housed is like $17,000 a year. The cost to put people in the housing and provide service is about $11,000 a year. So it's already an economically wise position. So what we're looking at is the Utah model, which is to provide housing and then go from there. Because I know it is impossible to have a functional life if you don't have a place to live and stay. It's hard to hold a job, it's hard to raise a family, it's hard to go to school. And so we're starting to realize, and I hope we'll move forward in an economically sound way, to put people in housing and then start to address some of the issues that kept them on the street from before. So I think we have a win-win situation on this question.
I'm glad to come after we solve the problem. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let me just say that, nobody wants to see a veteran or a disabled person homeless. And definitely the motels are not the way to go, for two reasons, actually, more than two probably, but it is not a home-like environment. It's no substitute for a real home. It doesn't really seem conducive to family life or a lifestyle that people would want to sustain. And on the other hand, when you put homeless people into the motels, you're taking away the income that the motels get from tourism, which is one of the driving economic forces of our state and pays most of the tax bill for many of the programs that we enjoy. So you don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face, but you do want to accommodate the people who really need the help. I liked some of these suggestions. I also think we could look into partnering and partnerships. In other words, not treating each of these problems in isolation, but partnering them with other situations that could support each other, and therefore bring down the cost of the benefit and the program and provide better services overall. It's not detailed, but I can talk to you later about it.
I'm glad, Representative Moran, that we are looking at the Utah model because it does seem to be cost-effective in the long run. I can personally attest, as a child, I did become homeless. Going from living in a house to living in a tent with my family and missing out on several weeks of my education, I know the effects that it has on people and that we absolutely do need to address this. The amount of people that are facing homelessness in Vermont is exponentially growing. So I do believe that we need to address it quickly, and I also think that we need to look at those long-term solutions, such as putting people into housing.
Like Dick Sears said, I'm not looking to promise anything. I think we pass laws, quite honestly, that are over-promising and under-delivering. And I would like us to focus most of this evening's discussion on growing our economy. Our economy is the basis of what we get in revenues that actually help to provide the resources for all of the issues that are before us that are significant and growing more significant each day in this economy. So I would like our most vulnerable to have the most strong and dependable safety nets, and that does mean that we pass law that has financial and resources backing considered upfront and implemented upon passage. Many of the pieces of legislation that we pass, someone indicated, I believe it was Dick, that $500,000 towards homelessness. Quite honestly, and I mean no disrespect, that's chump change, folks. We've got a huge issue out there, and in order to help our most vulnerable citizens, we have to have the means and the roadmap to get us through this. But a strong economy with folks working, lower taxes, people being able to, get out and I've got to stop, I'm sorry.
Thank you, everyone, for that, and thank you, Tracy, for your important question. So I actually have had the experience of working within the disability community for most of my life, even as a teenager, working at my high school, doing speech pathology and occupational therapy, physical therapy with local high school students. And as an adult, I actually had the opportunity to work for what was then called United Cerebral Palsy of King and Snohomish County, doing direct care for individuals. And what was unique about this and how it ties into your very question, Tracy, is the fact fact that what they did is they shut down the res. We were going to get rid of the institutions and put everybody into homes. And so in many situations, they were group home situations. They would take a single-family home with 3 or 4 bedrooms, and you'd have different individuals in there and provide wraparound services for those individuals in their homes. And so I got to see from the moment that they got out of the institution and they closed the doors to where they were not even a year or 2 later, and it was remarkable. It was a remarkable difference. And the ability to share those resources, to be able to not have to try to find a single unit with a small amount of a voucher, to be able to know that you're in a community still and you're also not isolated, was a huge piece for keeping people feeling safe, feeling cared for, and feeling a part of our community. So I think that if we're going to be thinking about projects like the Utah Project, that there's, again, and as Joanne was even saying, how are we going to partner with other area organizations, other agencies that provide services to ensure that that safety net isn't dropped all the way around. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy, for your question. It's really 2 questions. And the first one is, how will you be representing disabled individuals? And that question is the same way I've been doing it for the last number of years I've been there. It's by really listening to you, Sam, and your community at the bills that you identify and you bring forward, and that I've worked with many of my colleagues at this table here to move through. You have pointed out to me often the problem of people with, and I like to think of it as different abilities, that often are put in a place where they can't take the step into regular work because of falling off of a cliff if they lose $1. And we've worked on that, and we need to work on that more, because the best way to keep somebody from being homeless is that they can actually earn what they want, which is the resources to live just like everybody else.
I think that you'll probably hear from me tonight that these populations that you're dealing with are ones that I've been associated with, dealing with Tracy for my entire life since 1974 as a pastor. People come and knock on my door when they're homeless, when they need food, when they need heat, and they ask, what do you do? And so you respond to the individual the best you can. You seek to do the best you can for the person standing right in front of you. When it gets to the legislature, it gets a little bit more difficult. There are other persons, there are other people that are vying for other issues. There's only so much money to go around, and so what they do is they base their priorities on what their likes are, and not on the vulnerabilities of the citizens often. And I think that that's something that needs to be re-examined, because I think that all of us living here in this land need to feel that we are appreciated, that we're of worth and value, and that we have something to offer. And so I think that hopefully I would be able to offer some insight into how to do that, having worked with Habitat for Humanity and having worked with persons who have been homeless and then getting them placed in places where they need to be. I do believe the community idea is extraordinary, though. You have to have community and people folded into the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, up next, we have Mary for the supporters of the Vermont Veterans Home.
Hi, I'm Mary Garish, and I am here on behalf of the Vermont Veterans Home. No, I don't work at the Vermont Veterans Home. I am not a nurse, but as many of you know, my father was a physician and my mother was a nurse. And my father, in fact, after a tragic accident and a closed head injury, spent the last several years of his life at the Vermont Veterans Home. I'm the only one of the family that was here, and all of the employees of the Veterans Home were literally like family to him, and like family to me. And so not only does the Veterans Home provide health care to some of our most vulnerable persons, It also provides more than 200 jobs in our community. And it's the only veterans home within quite an area. It actually attracts people from New York as well as Vermont. As you may or may not know, it was actually established right after the Civil War as a Civil War soldiers' home. So it also has an historic significance. Over the past few years, there's been a problem with funding the veterans home, as there has been with everything everyone's been talking about, the budget problems that we're having in the state. I would like to remind everybody that this is a service that is crucial for the people who are there and for the members of their families. It's really somewhat of a jewel in our Bennington community. And I think that all of us across political party divides are proud to have the Vermont Veterans Home here and proud to have the employees who serve it. I would therefore like to ask you, considering the fact that healthcare is a public good according to the way that our legislators voted, I would like to ask you if you will support the Board of Directors of the Vermont Veterans Home, who recently confirmed their position at a meeting last week, as well as the members of this community in opposing any proposed privatization or sale of the Veterans Home to a private party. Thank you.
Yeah, I will 100% support you in your endeavors. I think that veterans, I'm against the wars, but I've worked with so many veterans over the years, and they get treated like you-know-what when they get out of the service, and I think it's criminal. I believe that the one thing that has worked in the past has been the veterans' homes, and they need to be strengthened. I just think it's one of the tragedies in America that the people who come back are not given what they need. And so my sense is, yes, no privatization, support the Board of Directors, make sure that we can continue with the Bennington Veterans Home the way it is now, and strengthen it, expand it, do what we need to do to make sure that the people who have served are respected.
In a word, yes. And briefly, I'm very glad to hear that particular piece, that the Board of Trustees voted that way. I think that the economic benefits are, of course, are very important, but more important to that are the many constituents I think that we all have that receive the services and report to us about the care that they received there, even in these strapped, difficult times. I think there are some areas where we could help our veterans even better. I think often the time lags that show up with service officers who have to arrive and come down from the state, that can leave people hanging and put often in a difficult position. I know this is also state, and many people are confused between federal vet benefits and state benefits, and we need to make sure that people understand their pathways and get the help they need to navigate an ever more complicated system. But the Vermont Veterans Home I think is one of the feathers in the hat of Bennington, and I'd like it to stay there.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you for that question again. So I've not served in the military, but I do have family and I have close friends that are currently serving. And my husband and I have been members of the Patriot Guard supporting our fallen throughout the region. And when I do think of the needs of our veterans, we need to protect veterans' benefits. We need to protect veterans' care at all stages. So not even just when we're at the veterans' home. This is it's emblematic of what's happening with our veterans on a federal and a local level. And we're going to be impacted very heavily by the needs of our veterans. So we need to strengthen it by not privatizing it at this point. So I'm in support of protecting our veterans' home for our community well into the future.
That's right. Yeah.
I have been very clear and continue to be very clear that I am against any form of even a discussion on privatization for the Vermont Veterans Home. As one survey indicated earlier this year that we might consider in the legislature. We are extremely fortunate to have the staff at the Veterans Home that we do that takes amazing care of our veterans. I have a long history in supporting budget measures that ensure public good for our veterans in the state of Vermont. I will continue to do that. My dad was a World War II veteran, and I have a special place in my heart for our veterans, and they need to have the care that they do. But we also have to be very thankful for the great staff that we have at the Veterans Home that, under trying times, seem to be able to continue to support our veterans like family, and it's very much appreciated.
So, full disclosure, I work at the Vermont Veterans Home. Thanks for asking the question, Mary. I have absolutely had my life changed by the experience that I have at the Veterans Home. It is a home. The staff and the families do come together to provide the best possible care for our veterans and their spouses. I have fought as a board member of the State Employees Association to maintain the Veterans Home as a public entity. I will continue to fight for that. We have been trying to work very hard with the administration in order to increase the census and reduce costs so that the Veterans Home will be viable in the long future. So I will continue to fight.
I sent a family your way last week.
Thank you very much. The veterans are very special to most of us, probably to all of us, and I would like to share with you, and I hope I don't make Mary cry, when we went and took the Christmas tree down to Washington, D.C. several years ago as the Capitol Christmas tree, we dedicated the trip to the veterans, and we stopped at a number of veterans facilities along the way through 5 different states. And we were delighted to kick it off here at the Vermont Veterans Home. And when we got down to Washington, D.C., and we went to Walter Reed, it was a turning point in my life because I was so impressed with the dignity and the outstanding courage that these young people had when they would come around to talk to you, and you would look down and they had no legs. And they would thank you for coming and bringing them a simple Christmas card and a small token from Vermont, and that they were so strong and so wonderful. They were truly inspiring. And these are the people that this Veterans Home serves, as well as older veterans like my dad, who's 94 years old and still living alone. But these are the types of people who have served our country and ask for very little. The least we can do is keep this facility open and keep it public and keep it running as well as it is. And I thank all the people who work there and those on the board.
I, like many at this table, have had the great opportunity to visit the Veterans Home over the years and to be supportive of the Veterans Home and enjoy our chance to visit with the veterans at the home. I concur with the resolution, obviously, that we do not privatize, and I agree with the board, I agree with the community, and I also agree with the union and non-union staff at the Veterans Home that this is the course of action we take. Since I serve on the Military Affairs Committee, we do oversee the Veterans Home. They come and give us reports on an annual basis or regular basis, whatever necessary. And my committee, and I suspect everybody in this table, really supports the Veterans Home, and will do everything in our power to reach out and make the Veterans Home whole and viable.
When you ever get to the point where all that can be said has been said, it's probably a good idea to just say yes. But I hate to be the bearer of, tidings here. I don't support privatization. I don't think that's the way to go. It's over 200 great jobs, high-paying jobs in this community that we can't afford to lose, just from an economic standpoint. And I agree with everything that's been said about veterans. The issue is sustainability of the Veterans Home. And we put $3 million, Alice talked about $500,000 for,
1.3 million.
no, $3 million. $3 million.
You got 3. I got
3 million.
1.3.
You got 1.5. We put $3 million of general fund dollars, which we've never done before,
That's right.
into the Veterans Home to help it help it through these troubled times. The issue is not whether or not we support veterans, whether or not we privatize. Can we sustain a census of about 150 veterans at the home to make it so it's self-sufficient and sustainable? And I think as a community, we have to do the marketing. We can't run around saying, oh, the veterans home is bad, this is that. We need to signify our support for our veterans home, the employees there, the board, et cetera, and work together to make that facility sustainable for the long haul. And I really sincerely mean that. Part of the problem is we don't get residents from Massachusetts because we haven't been able to work out any arrangements with them. That should be a priority for our delegation next session, is to try to work with Massachusetts, try to work with the congressional delegation there, and I have to stop.
There is very little to add, but I do want to mention, first of all, I'm in agreement with the prior speakers. It's interesting, there's a young fellow who's been helping Senator Sears and me with our campaign, who is a 25-year-old veteran. And his experiences are absolutely remarkable. And listening to him now on the GI Bill reminds me, and I'm sure everyone who has met this young man, that the Veterans Home needs to be there for him and his family when he gets to the point in his life when he wants to use it. So I would just, again, echo what everyone has said. Sustainability is essential. I know that the Veterans Home, all different levels, are working very, very hard to reach out, to raise funds, to improve the census. I know Senator Sears and Bernie Sanders have done work to expand who would qualify to be, to take advantage of the home. And I think you'll find a number, I think all of us, as real big advocates of it. Thank you.
One more.
I appreciate that, though, whoever Thank you, Charlie.
As a member of the House Appropriations Committee, I am responsible for a number of things. One, children and families budget, higher education, and the Veterans Home. I've learned a great deal about their budget and the work that they do there. It is most impressive. They have the best Alzheimer's unit in the country. They have received all kinds of awards for the kind of work and programs that they have. The problem, as Dick Sears pointed out, is with the census. I wish they had 150 people there. They do not. I think it's more like 115 now. The census is their real problem because that's how they get financed. If there's anybody here who thinks that number is larger, speak up.
Didn't they say 130?
Yeah, it's about
Because this is an old number that I...
135 last week.
135.
Well, that's much better, but it's still not 150, and the difference between 135 and 150 is a lot of money, and it used to be even higher than 150. I think it was 175. The average age of the people at the Veterans Home is 80. That's another very serious problem. Choices for Care, a wonderful program, keeps elderly people in their homes. Many of them are veterans, so they're not going to the Veterans Home. They're not going to the Veterans Home until the end of their life. They get there, they die soon after. That's why this census keeps getting impacted. What they have to do, and what they are doing, is work on admissions, marketing, to get veterans from other places around the state of Vermont and from other states. New York now, unfortunately, has said that, New York has said that no veterans from New York State can come to the Vermont Veterans Home if they live more than 50 miles away from New York, something like that. Anyway, that's hurting. Massachusetts, you heard about. They have their problems and their work cut out for them, but we have to help them survive. And you bet your life I'm against privatization. Why dumb down people's salaries and their jobs?
Right.
We need to raise wages, not lower them.
That's right.
Sorry for the...
Thank you all. We'll cut you short next question. So for our next question and story, I would like to introduce Heather from the Early Educators.
Good evening, candidates. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Heather Hassett. I'm a Vermont native, local business owner, mother of 4 children, and lifelong early educator. I am here tonight on behalf of Vermont Early Educators United. Home-based childcare providers from across the state have actively come together over the last 5 years to work toward improving early education in Vermont for the children and families we serve, as well as in support of the childcare providers who are doing the work. The availability of quality childcare is a vital resource for the health of Vermont's economy. According to the report titled How Are Vermont's Young Children, as of April 2014, there are over 57,000 children aged 8 and under in Vermont. Over 72% of those children who are under age 6 are being served by some sort of child care arrangement. A large percentage of them, albeit not large enough, receive some form of subsidy from the state in order to be able to attend work, school, or programs intended to assist families in improving their situations. Simply put, without early education, Vermont doesn't work, or at the very least, doesn't work well. In June, Governor Shumlin signed into law our right to form a union for the purposes of collective bargaining. In September, we petitioned the Vermont Labor Relations Board for recognition, and we look forward to sitting down and negotiating with the state for improvements to the early education system. We are the experts in our field. We know intimately the strengths and struggles within our profession and those of the families we serve. We are committed to nurturing and educating Vermont's upcoming generations and supporting their families to be the best possible citizens they can be. We hope you will stand with us and support the important work we do and the providers who do it. And our question is, do you support the right of all workers to live and work with dignity? To that end, will you support policies that guarantee all workers a livable wage, paid sick leave, and the right to organize and collectively bargain to improve their working conditions?
Yes. I have a.
Thank you, Alice.
My career has been in early childhood. I have a master's in early childhood. I did vote for this bill. And why did I do that? Because I believe that we have to enable and empower people to be in charge of their own destiny. And this is what they want for themselves. This will put them at the table. This will give them a voice and a vote, and that's why I supported it.
A very intelligent woman, my mother.
Thank you.
Well, for the record, Alice is not my mother. If I see that in the banner tomorrow. But in all seriousness, I do remember being told that we give so much incredible respect to faculty at our colleges and universities for all that they do. But really, the folks that make that initial huge difference are the early educators. Those are the folks that without that beginning, without those early days, many of us don't go all the way through and take advantage of our education. So without a doubt, I supported the bill as well. It is a profession that we need to start to treat like a profession. We really need to get out there, talk to folks, see what they need in terms of their education. How can they advance what they're doing in their classrooms? They very much are classrooms. They are teaching children every single day. Thank you.
Yeah, I supported the bill. I actually sponsored one of the earlier bills that didn't pass on the right to organize. I've always supported the right to organize. I support most of the agenda that was discussed. I do not support, just so that, get on the record, and I don't want people coming back at me and saying, well, you never told us. I don't support paid sick days. And there's a number of reasons for that. I don't have the time to get into it. Be happy to discuss that with anyone. But the bill never got to the Senate. It got out of, I believe, your committee, John, and didn't have the support in the House. I think that's one issue where I have a difficulty in supporting. but the others I certainly have supported, and I think I've got a good record in terms of organizing, voting for the home care workers, certainly voted with proud to have the endorsement of the VSEA, the NEA, and other groups. So, but I just want to make that clear, because otherwise somebody will come back and say, well, you never said that.
That question seemed to be asked by someone who had been in my committee room and looking at the bills up on our wall, because almost every one of them was there, from the livable wage to the minimum wage, from the child care workers union and the home care providers organizing bill, and also all the other minimum wage and the paid sick bill, yes, did come out of our committee after a lot of back and forth, and also a break bill. To me, a lot of the issues we're talking about here today keep going back to the budget and what we can afford. But one of the reasons we have a problem with the budget is because, first of all, we don't tax fairly in the state. We should tax the people who can afford to pay taxes more than we do. And we also should have a state that pays people a livable wage. FDR said it very clearly: no business has a right to exist if it can't afford to pay its employees enough money to live on. And until we get that principle down pat, until we start to understand that the people who with their hands create our economy need to be paid accordingly so they can support their families. And yes, I support all these bills, not only support them, I've actually argued for them on the floor and sometimes under fire, but this is how these things work. I appreciate all the support that many people up here have, and you don't have to agree with every position I have on a bill to know that you do stand for labor and you do stand for working people.
Yes, thank you. This issue regarding teachers who are working with the under 6 population that we have, this seems like a real common sense question. I don't understand why it's such an issue, except that traditionally it's been really brought to my attention over and over again that the people who deal with our most important resource, which is our young children, these are the people who are the most cherished members of our families. We entrust their care to professionals to take care of them, who teach them, who nurture them, who take them through the various stages of learning and teach them other things beside, teach them how to treat each other. This is a really formative period in people's lives. These are professionals, and it's amazing to me that ever since I can remember, this has been one of the lowest paid professions that I have ever seen in this country. And it boggles my mind that it's like, what, we don't care about children? They're not worth it? They are worth it, and the people who take care of them and teach them are even more worth it. Let's take care of them. Let's see what we can do to create some equity here across the board for the professions. And I'm totally in favor of whatever teachers can get.
So I honestly believe that working people in Vermont are the drivers of our economy, and that if we do not make a livable wage, we cannot buy things and spend our money on local products in order to boost our economy. I believe that every worker, it's a human right to be able to collectively bargain with their boss. We're talking about early educators, we're talking about teachers, bus drivers, all sorts of public service people in this state that are the experts, and they should have the power to be able to sit at the table with their boss and voice their expert opinion. I also am in support of earned sick days. I don't believe, as a healthcare direct caregiver, I do not believe that people should be going to work sick at any point. And I don't believe that they should be having to choose between feeding their families or taking care of themselves. So I am in support of all of those initiatives.
I did not support the child care unionization bill, and the reason I did not was we as a state could have looked to do the right thing by subsidizing the children that are within the private child center or child home providers' care. I think at the end of the day, I'm hoping that, actually Heather, who was the person that brought it forth to me, a few years ago, we had many discussions about it. And I want these good people who do provide great care to our youngest and most, at a time that is most needed for good education and support and social skills, that they should have a place at the table. I would have hoped that we would have, as a state, been able to do the right thing by subsidizing as we do for other child care centers. I'm afraid at the end of the day, if you don't have a strong enough place at the table, you will be paying more out in union fees than you may be actually getting that will help subsidize what you're doing. So that was one of my reasons I did not, and yet I support you having a fair place at the table to discuss. You should be there. You do great care and education pieces for our youngest in our community. The sick leave right at the moment, I have to stop.
So I appreciate Heather sharing her story, and I know we've talked about this a bit before, and the need for the early educators to organize is, it's given as an antidote, it's given as an example of why people need to be able to negotiate with their employers for what they need. They had to organize in order to be heard. And everyone should have the ability to be able to talk to their employer as an individual or as through an organization to be able to do so. I do believe that we need to have a living wage because a living wage does make a difference for everyone's quality of life. And so to that, I'd like to be able to say around the earned sick leave. And I'd like to make sure the language is earned sick leave because that is what's being proposed and is actually even being studied to see on data-driven levels how it's going to impact not only public health but our economy. And it's a crucial thing. I've been able to have the benefits of having an employing situation where I both earned sick leave or had comp time to use. And in both situations, it made it possible for me to be able to make clear choices about my health, about my family's health, and about my working situation, because I'm a hard worker, and people are hard workers. And it shows a sign of respect and a sign of appreciation for the work that you do to be able to say, you need to take care of what you need to take care of, and you've earned that time to be able to do so. It wasn't a given, it was earned. And I think that that should be something that should not be forgotten in the equation. Finally, with regards to looking at strengthening our workforce, it's really important as well that employees have an opportunity to be able to say to their employer, what ways can I make my working situation better? Oh, I have to stop. I got my first red card.
This is great and question. Actually, there's many questions in here. There's quite a bit to it. The first part that I would like to go to is on early childhood. Is this morning I had the pleasure of going down to, we have a local regional early childhood council. I spent the morning with it, and there are a couple of takeaways were very telling to me, and one is that if you invest, I think, $1,000 now in early education, later you will save about $7,000 in special ed costs down the road. So that's one big takeaway. The second one is, to me, is that, okay, that's a really valuable investment. How do we make that investment? What way do we do it that makes the most sense? And that needs to be looked at very carefully in terms of, which part of when we contribute, which pocket does it come from and in what way and from whom. So I think there needs really, to get this across the finish line, we need to come up with the best ways to make this investment for our workforce in the future, which is absolutely critical, that we have a first-rate workforce in order to be able to compete for employers and employees, and excellent relationship between both in that regard. I think when you get down to the sick leave question in an age of exposures that we worry about in public exposures, there's a lot we really need to consider from the public health point of view here. And I would keep that in mind. But I'm also very conscious of what is the result we want, that there need to be multiple pathways. And there are large organizations where this is not offered in any way that's completely counterproductive. But then we have lots of very small businesses that work it out in their own way and do a very good job.
There is 40% of the people who are incarcerated in jails in Vermont are functionally illiterate. Where does that start? It starts by not having early childhood education. I think there should be a universal plan for every child to have early childhood education. And so that begins to solve your problems, because you give the children, all of them, equal opportunity to get involved immediately in an education so that some are not behind by the time that they get to kindergarten. It doesn't work when you have all those children who go to kindergarten and some who never have a chance before kindergarten to have the nurture and the care that allows them to be entering at an equal level. I think that's number one. Number two, I think that things like Head Start programs like that have shown us the importance of early childhood education. We need to support the educators, make sure that they can do what they need to do, and it will help our state and everything else. So those are a couple of things. Yes, the right to organize, absolutely. I agree with that. Yes, on the other issue of a livable wage, absolutely. And thanks to those persons who already do such a marvelous job in early childhood education.
Wonderful. All right, up next, we have Bruce from 350.org.
Hi, I'm Bruce Henderson. I live in Bennington. And on September 21st, I participated in the People's Climate March in New York City, along with 2,000 other Vermonters and about 400,000 other people. About 4 years ago, I came across some comments on a news blog that were not true. I didn't know enough about climate change to explain why they misrepresented the evidence for climate change, so I looked them up on the internet. I found climate change was hotly disputed in comments and blogs on many of the articles. I found politicians I always thought would be working to fix the problem were ignoring it. The few politicians who said anything were the ones actively trying to discredit it. So I started reading everything I could find about global warming or climate change. I read articles and research papers online. I read books at home, and I sat in on discussions by climate scientists, listening to their firsthand experience with the research and politics of climate change. I learned the details of the physics of the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is a description of what happens when we add excessive amounts of carbon dioxide to our atmosphere. What happens is a molecule of CO2 traps a photon of light for a very brief amount of time, like a millisecond, and then it releases the photon to be trapped again by another molecule. When more CO2 is added, more light energy is trapped. It's physics, and you can't argue with physics. The predictions made 30 years ago by the government's own scientists are happening now, much sooner than expected. What they said would happen was conservative estimates. It was the best case scenario. In the last 30 years, the United States has prevented every effort to make changes that have to be done. So now we are 30 years behind. Global warming is happening faster than expected, and the predictions going forward become more dire and catastrophic every year. It's the consequences of dumping greenhouse gases into the air we all breathe. It's based on physics. If you dump a certain amount of CO2 into the air, you'll trap a certain amount of heat energy. It's observable and it's measurable. The effects of global warming will be felt worldwide, but the people who it will hit the hardest are the ones who are least able to do anything about it. It'll be the poorest regions, the people who did the least to cause it, will suffer the most. The towns and cities will be left to manage as best they can. Because the world's governments can't work together, the towns and cities have to make their own plans. The state of Vermont is taking climate change seriously. It is working to improve public transportation system and energy efficiency of homes, but still the burden will fall upon the people who can least afford it. Most people won't be able to afford more insulation and new electric cars and distributed solar power. Renters will still have to live in homes that are hard to heat. The state has made a commitment to reduce the CO2 emissions by 90% by 2050. To do this, the state has to change the public transportation system, how we heat our homes. The state has to stop supporting the fossil fuel industry, including the frack gas. It has to end subsidies, stop investing in fossil fuels, and stop building new fossil fuel infrastructure. I've spent the last 4 years learning about the problem and solutions. We cannot make the transition to a low-carbon future without the state's help. My question for the candidates is, will you commit to applying the best solutions for the people of Bennington County to mitigate the worst of climate change for the people who can least afford it? Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. I think that you have to take a look at the economy as we've viewed it in the age of fossil fuel, and that is a dead end. You can't look at the economy anymore based upon fossil fuels because we don't have them. It's a neoliberal industrial age idea that has carried on into the present time. We can't afford it. There has to be a looking at even the basics of economics, which the whole root word, ecology, economics, ecumenicity, everything has to do with the household. You have to look at the economy as a household, at the community as a household. Everything has to be interrelated. And that's not what's happening with budgets. It's not what we look at anymore. We all look at linear, and we need to look at a circle, because all of us are interconnected, and we have to start living that way. And I think we can solve the problems if we get away from the linear looking at the economy, and then you can start dealing with fossil fuels the way it needs to be dealt with, and we can make the changes that need to happen once we see ourselves as part of an ecosystem. We're all involved. We're all part of it. We all need to be supportive, and I think that that's the smartest way in which you can deal with the whole issue that you've brought up. I think it's really there to be had, have discussion on, and to change the whole idea of budgets and how you look at budgets in the future.
Thanks. As a representative of a community that was absolutely hammered by Irene, believe me, I get it. Woodford has gone through and is still dealing with the after effects of that. Pownell was lucky it had enough floodplain for water to spread out and not take out a couple of bridges it could have. I think a little bit more rain and it would have been high on the list of expenses that would have been out there. So, you know, that's a big part of it. I'm glad you mentioned what the legislature is already doing. I think a lot of our policies do make sense. I think especially our policies around distributed electricity and our policies around the working land. I think our food sources and local growing, value-added, you know, Vermont strategy of the Vermont brand is a big part of this in a way, and that's pretty important. Also, the distributed electricity, I'm very pleased that this year a couple of individuals, I think, have done the work and finally gotten the funding for the small hydro out here in Paper Mill Village. I'd like them, work with them and continue to work with them on the same thing in Pownell. We need that to be our sources, and we can move as much as makes sense towards electricity. I also note that today I think I received an announcement from Brock that one of their individuals got a national award for the work that they do in efficiency. Brock's the Bennington Rutland Opportunity Council. I think we should follow up on their lead, and especially in helping low-income houses, that great vulnerability that you point out, have the ability, you know, have more of their resources in their pocket so that they can participate in the economy and not be quite so subject to the problems of heating and electricity.
Thank you. Yes, that's absolutely one of the most critical pieces is can the average person get access to the initiatives that are in place to try to bring cost savings? Because that's the group that needs it the most. So these aren't vanity pieces that we get to do to be able to say, I have a net zero home because I could afford it. It's something that you want to be able to get to and be able to make access to. So I'm absolutely committed to determining those pathways. I look at Burlington and the recent news that they've had on the great strides they've been able to make at using kind of a multifaceted approach towards reducing their need for fossil fuels and their ability to be able to use renewable energy for an entire city. So there's some great things that are out there that we need to keep looking at and seeing what happens with that so that we can replicate them down here. I think we have great opportunities to do that. But it needs to be something that is not just for those that are affluent, but for everyone who can actually access them.
Thank you. And within your remarks, you said the best solutions. One of the challenges for all of us is that many times there are many solutions out there, and so we have to come together to actually decide what the best solutions are for our county so that, again, everyone can be served and benefit from whatever those choices are going forward. So often we will pass legislation, and I'll have many constituents that call that will say, well, I'll be able to get something that is even a refrigerator or a piece of equipment that's efficient, and what will my benefit be? And quite often when they go through the system of finding out what they may get back, they're not eligible. So you're right, it needs to be opened so that all of our citizens can benefit in an appropriate way to get the benefits of turning this around in the carbon, emissions. So, and again, we need to look as a state. There's been for many years, we have not put together a strong portfolio of all of our resources in order to go forward to have efficient, reliable energy, cost-efficient, and for all.
So this is not a new issue. Like you said, Bruce, it's been around for a long time. I remember learning about global warming when I was in probably 4th or 5th grade. And I thought at that time that we would be much further ahead in our progress, and instead we're further behind. I support expanding renewable energy resources in Vermont. I think it will provide well-paying jobs, and I think that we need to move away from fossil fuels. I also would like to see the state of Vermont divest from fossil fuel funds. It's important. We all deserve to live in a healthy planet. The time is now. I don't think that we can spend much more time planning and planning and planning. We need to act, and I would do anything to support that.
Thank you. This issue is so big that I think a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their heads around how can they impact on the global warming issue. We can all do little things, and I think most of us here and most of us in Vermont are basically extremely capable and very experienced in being efficient. I know myself, speaking as a person who does spend 1/2 of her income on housing, that I keep my house at 55 degrees in the winter. As a result, for the first time, I have not gotten pneumonia during the winter. I think it's because I bundle up all the time. Love to be able to winterize my house better, love to be able to replace the 1905 windows in my house. However, that's not going to happen. And I think for a lot of people, you're in the same situation. Global warming is a problem. How do we stop it? How do we remedy it? There's no one answer. I think there have been some really good movement taken on here in this state. One of the projects that Bill alluded to was the paper mill bridge over in North Bennington, where Bill Scully is working on the hydroelectric. There is a lot of untapped water resources here in Vermont. We all know everywhere you go, we have water. not always in our basements, but, but there are a lot of streams, a lot of surface water, but there are a lot of rivers, brooks, and streams that could be harnessed. And I'd like to see a lot more of that happening, and I think once Bill is successful, other people are going to jump on the bandwagon. Okay, that's all I have to say for now, because I got the red card.
I would like to reduce the question to 1 acre in Reedsboro, Vermont. As I was going door to door, I stepped out and there's a constituent named John, and I noticed he had a wind generator on his roof. And I thought, wow, that's nice. And I looked at his backyard, and he had solar panels in his backyard. And I looked at him, I said, wow, wind and solar, well, all you need is hydro. He said, come here. Went in his backyard, there's a little creek running through his yard. He had a little hydro plant in his backyard. It was hard to get around to his property because there was so much gardening. And I said, what's going on here? And he says, I make my own wine, I make my own cheese, I grow the vegetables in here. So there was one example, 1 acre in Breedsboro. The question is obviously a lot larger, but we can all follow from that example. We can support renewable energy. We can have we can have panels. They don't even have to be on our property. We can hire panels elsewhere and then get credit on our net metering to our property and reduce our electric bills. So this state is, and the question is clearly said, this state is way ahead in energy efficiency. We really have made a commitment, and I think it is a wise commitment because not only will it stop that small amount of carbon in 1% of the air that could be so destructive to our planet, but we can also create economic development, and we can also make it a cleaner and a more beautiful state to visit.
Nice.
I agree with everything that's been said. Unfortunately, because of a technological difficulty, some of us didn't get the question. So, and that's just the way it is. So this one takes me a little by surprise. Wasn't prepared for it. Climate change is real. I think we all know that. I don't think there's much doubt about that. Just go out today, October 15th, and you're in short sleeves. So, you know, it's 75 degrees. The question really is how, as I understand the question, is how do we make the energy efficiency things available for folks. I don't know how we buy everybody an electric car. I don't think that's realistic. But how do we make basic weatherization, other items available to the general public? And I think we have to do a much better job. And as a state, we are so far ahead of the rest of the nation. We are, I think, number one in that effort right now. And we have so far to go. Just imagine how far other states have to go. But I'm committed to continuing our effort. Where are we going?
Thanks. I think one of the things that we could all do today, tomorrow, that is really reach out to the federal government. This is, as everyone knows, a world issue. And Vermont, in terms of mitigating it, it has to be really a big global partnership. Some wonder if it really can be mitigated at this point. What we are now in the process of doing, and Vermont is doing it extraordinarily well, as everyone has mentioned. Two major things. Number one, moving us away from fossil fuels and using our natural resources and renewables. Secondly, we have to prepare because everyone here was here when Irene hit. And scientists are saying that the weather and the climate is just going to become more severe. So those are two major things that we as Vermonters need to do to prepare for our future and our children's future, because this is perhaps, people are saying, beyond really making dramatic changes, unfortunately.
I think everyone has said this so well. I'm absolutely in support. And I'm going to a summit at the University of Vermont in November on climate change. From the time I saw Al Gore's film on what is happening in this world, I've understood that this is a very serious problem that needs our attention, and it's going to get that.
All right, at this point, I'm going to pass it over to my co-moderator, John.
Good evening, candidates. My name is John Ransom. In case you recognize me from my monthly spirituality column in the Banner, please hold your eggs and rotten tomatoes. I'd appreciate that. I am a resident of Reedsboro, which, contrary to popular opinion, is in Vermont and is in Bennington County. And what I've noticed through the discussion tonight is that the subject of health care has popped up a number of times in a number of different contexts. So rather than beating around the bush, let's get right to the health care question. Please respond to these questions first with a yes period or a no period, and then please go on to explain your position. Do you commit to passing a public financing plan for universal comprehensive health care that meets the health needs of all Vermonters and is equitably funded through progressive taxes rather than out-of-pocket costs? And secondly, will you help overcome any obstacles on the path to our human right to health care? And please again begin your answer with a yes or a no. Thank you.
Yes. Healthcare cost this state $2.5 billion a few years ago. It climbed to $5.5 billion. It's somewhere around $7.5 billion today. It's unsustainable the way it is. It has to change. The governor's worked very hard. He's trying to get single payer here. We're the only industrial country that doesn't have it. And we're not providing the best health care, even though we're spending all this money. People cannot afford $25,000 deductibles, $12,000 deductibles for health care. We have to fix this problem. Now, we've had a terrible, unfortunate problem with the execution of our plan, our programs of health care in Vermont, and you all know about that. It's driven some of you crazy. It's driven me crazy trying to get at this. We brought in a company to implement it, and they just did not do the best job. But we haven't given up. We're still trying, and I just think it's an effort that we just have to work at, because the way it is doesn't work. It's bankrupting us.
I agree with Alice. The current system is completely unsustainable, and having voted for Act 48, I too, yes, want to move in the direction of a universal health care program. But I also want to make certain that I too am careful not to make promises before seeing the governor's financing plan. I, without a doubt, want to make certain that when people need access to a physician, they have access. And again, having supported Act 48, supported it wholeheartedly, not only from a healthcare standpoint, but also from an economic development standpoint. I mean, if we could deliver a predictable cost to healthcare, this would make this state much more attractive to businesses. No, right now, if you look at healthcare costs, they have absolutely skyrocketed. So, having been a supporter of Act 48, I can tell you I'm committed to continuing in that direction, but am eager to see that financing plan. Thank you.
I'm too supported Act 48, and will continue to do my best to see this happen. But as Brian said, and others will mention, we don't know what the financing plan is. We need to understand what waivers we're going to be able to get from the federal government. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're going to get on it and I think committed to doing our best to arrive at a point where everyone is covered. How it's all going to be financed, who's going to pay what, those things, not only do we have to see the governor's plan, the legislature also has hired outside consultants to give us an idea as well. So to try to sit here tonight and tell you what it's going to look like, very difficult to do. And I think that best we can do is say, you know, from my part, best I can do is say I'm going to do my best. I've voted for healthcare reform back 1994, I think, when it died the last time. So been consistent in trying to change the system. I'm going to get strangled in this. I hope there's a doctor. Where's Dick Dundas when I need him?
The healthcare, or the lack of healthcare in this country, is what got me into politics to start with. We're on a revolutionary action course right here, and it is the most exciting time. We're turning an aircraft carrier around because we're going for the last 110 years of a healthcare system that has to be changed so it's universal to cover all of us. Affordable, universal healthcare is a human right, a must. I, like many of the people at the table here, and probably others at the table, still have a lot of questions about some of the details and the rollout. But remember, there are two groups of people who are resisting some of the process of this health care. There are some people who, at this table, have genuine concerns about some of the details. And there's another element that just does not want this process to happen. And so please sort out those questions when you hear them. When I go door to door, I got the same questions that we're hearing, concerns we're hearing here. And so what I did is I set up a forum to take place. It's going to happen on October 20th in Dover, Vermont. No, wait, don't say that's too far away, because I assure you, I came 45 minutes over 2 mountains to get here, so Dover, Vermont is not too far away for you to go to. It'll be Robin Lunge, it'll be Lawrence Miller, and it'll be a member of the Vermont Green Mountain Healthcare Board. They are going to be in Dover at 6:30 on the 20th, that's a Monday night, to try to answer some of the questions that were asked here as we move forward on this healthcare program.
Thanks. I'd like to say that the question regarding universal health care, there's a distinction between universal health care and single-payer health care. Single-payer is what we're working with now with the Vermont Health Connect. We're looking to move into the universal health care, and I think that is a very important issue. We have to get away from focusing on the insurance payments, the insurance premiums. What are you going to pick? What are you going to have as your ultimate financial expense? What is your copay? All these different issues. This is very confusing to people, and I like to make an analogy. It's sort of like when you're going to buy detergent or toothpaste. There's a lot of PR and very little real choice. It's all toothpaste and it's all detergent. And we want health care. We don't really want to worry about the premiums and all these other things. So in my opinion, I would rather pay a tax, because I'm going to be paying $6,000 a year for a premium, which may go up or down, or probably not down, but I'll be paying that anyway. If I'd rather pay the same amount and have that cover not just me, but other people too who maybe can't afford to pay that tax, and know that everybody's getting good quality health care, and that we all have access to health care, and that everything is fairly equal. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's just my opinion, and I think it's worth looking into and worth pursuing. That's all I have to say, and I will gladly pass the mic.
So, yes, I've worked almost my entire adult life in the healthcare. That work has been through providing direct care, and that has led me to support healthcare for all, universal healthcare. I believe we need to reduce the increase of rising costs in healthcare by eliminating profit and bureaucracy, through prevention, and providing the right care at the right time to all Vermonters. I don't know what the governor's plan is. If I get elected, I'll be looking forward to hearing his plan and also the study that the legislature's done. But I do know that every other major industrialized nation in the world provides health care at a more affordable rate and it's many times better quality care. So I think it's really important that we do eliminate the things that, the bureaucracy and the profit in our healthcare industry that make it so destructive for us.
Sorry. Yeah, the answer is yes, and I do want every Vermonter to have quality health care through real reform. I have been through several reform presentations or policies in my time in the legislature, which, because of the lack of transparency or the lack of a real plan going forward, they didn't last for long, and actually, I think, made the problem worse. This, in getting to a quality health care, it would require one of the largest tax increases in Vermont's history. Over $2 billion of new taxes will be put forth, and so we have to be very careful on what we're looking forward, especially to not further diminish our economy. Out-of-pocket costs would still exist, and the system would need to include, at this time, the Medicare population in order for this to work. The numbers are including Medicare at this time and with a waiver. I will not put our Medicare population at risk. That is one thing I will not do. I will look at any financing plan when the governor releases it, as it should have been in 2013 by law under Act 48. Otherwise, we could be answering your question this evening if we knew what the plan was. So I will look at any, this process needs to be transparent, honest, and accountable so that there are no obstacles for Vermonters to have true quality health care. And we all need to work together to do that in order for us to have a good quality health care.
Thank you. So the question is, will I work towards healthcare and healthcare reform that's going to move us away from the fee-for-service and the high deductible system towards something better? Yes, absolutely. Healthcare is a basic human right that everyone deserves, but to make healthcare affordable, and this is me putting on my hat as the former community health improvement specialist for Southwestern Vermont Healthcare, looking at it from a regional system, in order to drive down the cost of healthcare, we have to raise a healthy community. And so in order to do that, we have to actually address the social determinants that are driving our healthcare costs up. And those are identified as being poverty, okay, and economic stability. So is there work? Do people make a livable wage? Education. So do people have access to education and the economic mobility that it provides? Social and community connectivity. Are we connected as a society? Do people know their neighbors? Is there a sense of belonging for whether or not we matter to each other? Health and access to healthcare. So as it was said earlier, do we actually even have the medical providers that are needed to be able to work on us, not just when we're sick, but to also think about preventative care as well? And our neighborhood and built environment. So do we have quality housing, streets that are in disrepair? Do we have public transportation? Do we have access to healthy foods and needed groceries? This is something that has been addressed and understood on a global scale that are the social determinants that actually affect whether or not we're healthy. And so if those pieces are there, you're going to be healthier. So it's something that it's scientifically shown to increase one's life expectancy substantially, depending on what your zip code is. So if we have those pieces, we can actually drive down the cost of health care in a very comprehensive way.
I think Kaya hit that one over the fence, basically. So, yes, I've been voting for universal health care for quite a few years here. I do think we have an opportunity here in Vermont to have a competitive advantage, for both, for all of our citizens, if we can deliver a health care that is less fraught. I think the part that you really impressed me, Kaya, is that you get it, is that we have to start paying for keeping communities healthy, not for our providers getting paid by how sick we are. And that means that we have to be in this too. We have to do our part. I'm very pleased to know that the hospital, I think all of you know this, is interested in better primary care and a primary care center in my town, Pownell, and plans are, well underway to build that. We really need to work on people having access to primary care physicians, nurse practitioners, and everybody along that line. And I think this is one where we have to be in totally, in a sense. We do have to look very carefully at the plans that have come along. I do think we've hit some big stumbling blocks, some obstacles with the federal health care exchanges. We were actually on a path that was probably a lot simpler and a lot easier to do, but I do think we made the right choice in saying we're going to try to do the best we can, with our own plan. We should look very carefully and revisit all of the various pieces that go with it. This has been a long, ongoing conversation, as Dick pointed out, in the State House, and we have to do our due diligence and deliberate, but make sure that our people can have the lives that they want and the most productive lives by being backed by a good healthcare system.
I think this goes back to prioritizing. This should be priority number one. Yes, for universal health care, it is a human right. I think that Kaya hit it over the fence, as Bill said, and I agree with Bill as well. I think that as we look at health care, we also have to incentivize having good health care, taking care of ourselves, eating healthy food, supporting the farmers that produce the healthy food locally. Look at it like an ecosystem. We all are part of, if you eat well, if you take care of yourself, and you won't have to go to the doctor so much. Those are elements that have to do with a healthy lifestyle, and this is all about how we take care of ourselves and how we look at our neighbors and how we help them, all of that, because I think that we are all connected here. We need to really be aware that there are issues here where we don't know all the figures, but we can solve this problem. This is not insurmountable. We have solved much bigger problems than this in the past. This can be solved, and I think that the legislators will do this and really make a very outstanding system for the state of Vermont. And I'm glad that we're stepping forward with universal health care, because I think it's really important and it should be priority number one.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your thoughtful and great remarks. And we had intended to have a lot of time left for audience questions, but we don't. And so I think that all the questions I have, with one exception, have emails on them, and the one that doesn't have an email, I know the email, so I can put it on. And what I will do is make copies of these for each of you before you leave, and perhaps you can respond to these folks at their email addresses. And if those folks want to share it with the rest of us, they can let me know, share your responses. They can let me know, and we have a sign-in list with emails, so I'm happy to send it on to anybody. I also want to say that as your special door prize for coming tonight, you can get a free healthcare is a human right or put people first sign. There are long signs out at the, there are long signs outside the door, and there are signs in here, and feel free to help yourself. And the other thing I'd like to do is to thank all of you for having come tonight and for having listened to and participated in the stories of the folks of Bennington community and county, who some of you already represent and some more of you will represent in the coming year. And you've heard a lot about a lot of different things. You heard about healthcare and equitable financing in healthcare. You heard about work with dignity. You heard about environmental concerns. All of these concerns are human rights, as most of you have acknowledged. And we here in this room know that Vermont has many times in the past led the way, led the nation in causes. And this goes way back to the Revolutionary War, Civil War, and most recently with Act 48 and healthcare. We're asking you to stay on the path that leads us all to living a dignified life where our human rights are protected and served by our state government. And we're going to do everything in our power to encourage you to do that. We're going to come to Montpelier. We're going to send you emails. We're going to hold up signs. And before we leave tonight, we're all going to sign photo petitions so we can send them to you in the mail. So thank you for being here tonight, and thanks to the audience as well.